Welcome, you're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. The headlines this hour. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu set to meet with US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris in Washington. He will be kingmaker, but never the king. Palestinians react to reports that Mohammed Dahlan is favoured to take over in Gaza. And Russia's Vladimir Putin hosts the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad amid signs of a rapprochement between Syria and Turkey. But first, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting both US President Joe Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris at the White House tonight. Harris is also now the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee. The meeting follows Netanyahu's speech to Congress last night, in which he asserted that the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the United States were one and the same. Our Bianca Zanini has this report.
America and Israel must stand together because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose. And my friends, I came to assure you today of one thing: we will win.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a fiery speech at the U.S. Congress Wednesday evening. A record fourth speech by a foreign leader to a joint Congress, receiving a 1-minute standing ovation before even uttering a word, and then at least another 50 rounds of applause throughout the speech. Netanyahu spoke of the horrors of October 7th and praised the hostages who were safely returned home and the Israeli soldiers fighting against Hamas terrorists. He spoke of unity between America and Israel and the need to forge a security alliance in the Middle East to counter Iran.
Iran is virtually behind all the terrorism, all the turmoil, all the chaos, all the killing. My friends, if you remember one thing from the speech, remember this: our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight. And our victory will be your victory.
Netanyahu thanked America for its support and asked to fast-track military aid so Israel can finish its job faster. But despite the applause, Netanyahu's visit was marred by controversy. Outside the capital, thousands took to the streets to protest.
I want to be part of a historic movement to stop the genocide, stop the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, to show solidarity.
Some protests even turning violent, with police using pepper spray. One pro-Palestinian demonstrator spray-painted a message in support of Hamas.
Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Netanyahu dismissed criticism of the war in Gaza, claiming that almost no civilians were killed in the latest operation in Rafah, but didn't mention the overall number of almost 40,000 people killed in Gaza since the war began. Although Netanyahu spoke to a crowd of allies and supporters, it wasn't a full house. Around 70 members of Congress, almost all of them Democrats, decided to boycott the speech. Others, like Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib, held a sign with the words "war criminal." 3 family members of hostages held in Gaza were escorted out while wearing T-shirts written "Seal the deal," referring to the ceasefire for hostages deal currently being negotiated between Israel and Hamas. A deal many had hoped Netanyahu would address.
Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza. But for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
The immediate response from Hamas was that, quote, the speech shows Netanyahu does not want to conclude the ceasefire deal.
Well, in a few moments, we'll head to Washington, D.C. To talk a bit more about Prime Minister Netanyahu's meeting tonight with President Biden and Vice President Harris. But with me in the studio this hour, Eran Lahav is a senior researcher for global terrorism and Iran proxy organisations at the IDSF. Good to have you with us, Eran. Thank you for joining us. So the speech last night did focus very much on Iran and the threat that Iran poses, not just to Israel, but other countries around the world. Do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu did enough to win over some sceptical senators there?
I think, yeah, indeed. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, what he did, he managed to convey a direct message that Israel and other Western countries are on the same boat as it comes to the threat from Iran's side. And we need to understand when Iran threats Israel, it affects the rest of the world. And Israel in Iran's strategy is just the first phase.
Okay, all right, Arad, for now, stay with us. We're going to go to Washington, D.C. now. We're joined by our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. So, Mike, Benjamin Netanyahu finally got that invitation to the White House, didn't he? Although not quite under the circumstances he expected, perhaps.
No, if you'll recall, it seems like ancient history now. Prior to October 7th, there was a countdown of how long it was until the Prime Minister would receive the coveted invitation here to the Oval Office. It had been so long into the Biden tenure here in the White House, and Netanyahu didn't receive the invitation. They met on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York a few weeks prior to October 7th. It was almost seen as a setback to Prime Minister Netanyahu that he just couldn't get into the Oval Office once again. Well, here he is in a post-October 7th world. He's isolated diplomatically, politically. Obviously, you've seen the polls over the last few months, and they haven't gotten much better in time. That's on the Israeli side. On the American side, well, obviously things have taken a turn here in Washington over the last few days. Joe Biden is now a lame duck. But on the flip side of that, well, it means he doesn't have to worry about electoral concerns much anymore. And generally speaking, when Prime Minister Netanyahu has departed Washington and flown back to Jerusalem, there are always those leaks to the media saying, well, we told the American president what's what and who's who. I'm not sure if the prime minister is really in a position to do that this time around. There'll be talk about Iran, of course, as there any time is when there's a meeting between Israeli and American leadership, no matter what the level is. Obviously, though, a big focus will be on finally securing a hostage deal and a ceasefire. A senior Biden administration official speaking to reporters after Netanyahu's speech yesterday said the essential framework of a deal is in place, but the devil is always in the details, and the implementation of phase 1, phase 2, and so forth still needs to be worked through. Asked whether Netanyahu is the one holding up a deal, the administration official said that's not under consideration right now. The Israelis have, quote unquote, put a lot on the table in terms of concessions, and a deal is closable, in the words of that official.
And Netanyahu will, of course, also be meeting with Vice President and Democratic presumptive nominee Kamala Harris. She's given, or her office has given, a few clues just as to how that meeting might go later, Mike.
Well, you know, this is really going to be almost a get-to-know-you meeting. Biden and Netanyahu go back decades, as they say ad nauseum. 40 years now they've known each other. There's really no surprises there. But with Netanyahu and Harris, there's little history. And, of course, so much about politics is based on personal history and personal relationships, especially when you're dealing with foreign policy. Harris has essentially mimicked Biden in the response post-October 7th. Some of the criticism from the vice president's office has gotten out ahead of the Oval Office itself, but for the most part, they've been aligned in both their praise, their sympathies, and their criticisms of the Israeli government and Netanyahu in particular. But again, Harris now the presumed front runner, actually the presumed nominee at this point for the Democratic ticket. And so this is a much more important meeting than it was just, 72 hours ago in terms of the Harris-Netanyahu relationship.
And the Prime Minister will be rounding off his trip in Florida, where he'll be meeting former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, that should be interesting in Mar-a-Lago tomorrow morning. Netanyahu and Trump obviously had what some would term a bromance throughout the course of the Trump White House. It faltered in the end, as many romances do, with some harsh words being sent across the way by Donald Trump in the aftermath of Netanyahu's belated congratulations to President Biden for winning the election. There are also some other tensions that were released afterward in terms of some events that occurred in the later days of the Trump administration. Both Trump and Netanyahu, according to those in the know and who have kept in touch with both of them, say the past is the past. They can have a fruitful relationship once again should Trump come back to the White House in January.
Mike, thank you very much indeed. Mike Wagenheim there in Washington. Well, Israel's foreign minister says that he has warned his French counterpart of an Iranian-linked plan to disrupt the Olympic Games. The alleged plot comes on the back of heightened security surrounding the Israeli delegation, given tensions stemming from the war with Hamas. With more, our correspondent Robert Swift.
There are those who seek to undermine the celebratory nature of this joyous event. Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, wrote to his French counterpart, warning of an alleged Iranian-backed plot to target Israeli Olympians. According to Israeli intelligence assessments, Iranian proxies may target Israeli Olympians or tourists during the Games in France.
After October 7, it is a bit terrifying that something similar like what happened there could happen here. But life doesn't just stop, we go on.
Israel's foreign ministry has not declassified and published any intelligence to back up its claim, as the US has on occasion begun doing to reinforce its positions. Meanwhile, Israel's soccer team kicked off their opening match against Mali, drawing 0-0.
I don't like football at all. I'm just coming here to support Israeli team, just for that.
Like the rest of Israel's delegation, the Olympic soccer team is operating in France under heavy security, provided by French authorities and the Shin Bet. This year's Games take place 5 decades after 11 Israeli athletes were killed by Palestinians at the 1972 Munich Olympics. Tensions related to the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza have led to enhanced security and heightened tensions. 6 Palestinian athletes are competing in the Games, with many keen to use the platform as an opportunity to highlight their people's plight.
We're with the people of Gaza. My family is there. I have so many friends there, and it's just, we're here for so much more than just competing. We're here to represent our country and to fight for our country in a very peaceful way.
In Gaza, 300 athletes have died and all sports facilities have been destroyed since October the 7th, Palestinian sports officials say. And the Games go.
Well, to talk more about that, with me in the studio, Eran Lahav, and joining us from the US, Jason Brodsky is the policy director of the group United Against a Nuclear Iran. Welcome to you, Jason. And this is exactly what Prime Minister Netanyahu was warning about last night, wasn't it? That the threat from Iran is not focused solely on Israel. It is a threat to the world.
It's great to be with you, Laura. Yes, I agree. This is what he was warning about last night. And I think that this latest reporting about plots against Israeli athletes participating in the Olympics is really a function of the lack of deterrence or the eroded deterrence that the West has vis-a-vis Iran. And we're seeing it also in the United States with the Iranian plot to assassinate the Republican nominee for president of the United States. That's a shocking development, but not a surprising one. So I think that we have a deterrence problem with respect to the Islamic Republic that needs to be solved quickly in order to save lives.
All right, thank you, Jason. Eran, do you agree with that? Is this a deterrence issue?
Absolutely, and it's not surprising because Iran is, this is like a continuing campaign that Iran is doing. On one hand, they did it diplomatically. They tried to boycott the participation of Israel in the Olympics. They were trying to do it also on social media, and also lots of advertisement about this, how to boycott Israel and they should not participate in the Olympics. And on the other hand, there's ongoing activity with its proxies, for example, Hezbollah in Europe. And we see also that in Germany lately, they've been a raid on the Islamic Center, which is the second raid in Hamburg, which is Iranian Shiite center in Hamburg, which is trying to influence the Shiite community and infiltrate also Hezbollah activists in Europe in order to target also Jewish targets and also Israeli targets and institute in Europe. So this is totally not surprising, totally agree.
And Jason, on that series of raids in Germany yesterday, several German cities, Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg among them, Iran has summoned the German ambassador to talk about that. Do you think they were expecting that?
I think that the Iranians have long been suspecting German activity to increase against the Islamic Center of Hamburg. My organization, United Against Nuclear Iran, was very proud to have provided information to the German authorities, specifically the German Interior Ministry, about radicalization happening in the Islamic Center of Hamburg, particularly with partnerships with Hezbollah-linked entities like the University of Religions and Denominations. Let's not forget the Islamic Center of Hamburg hosted Ali Reza Arafi, who's a member of the Guardian Council in the Islamic Republic and the former the chairman of the Al-Mustafa International University, which is under counterterrorism sanctions in the United States for its recruitment of students to be used for Quds Force intelligence purposes. So this is a very serious security concern. And by the way, we should be hopefully seeing the same scenes that occurred in Germany yesterday at Khamenei's representative offices around Europe, because they are all following the same radicalization blueprint.
Thank you, Jason. Iran, do you see any sign that the Europeans are ready to do that? They have, of course, stopped short of listing the IRGC, the Iranian Revolution of Gaza, as a terrorist organization.
Yeah, indeed. I think not all European countries are actually aware of it, or at least do not really understand also what the terms about a jihad war against, or jihad warfare, I would say. I would also want to add that this specifically center in Hamburg, the imam of this center is in contact with Ali Sistani, which is the main cleric of the Shiite community in Iraq, and also related to a very dangerous terrorist organization in Iraq, which is also pro-Iranian. It's called Hashad al-Sha'bi. And we can see how it's related to Iran. I don't know if every European country is really aware of this. Germany is doing some significant acts in the last years, but I think the Western world is not totally awake.
Okay, all right, thank you, Aaron. Jason, I just want to bring it back to the US before you go. I mean, Netanyahu made the point about the protesters that we've seen on American streets in recent months. He said they were Iran's useful idiots, and almost as if they were trying to prove his point, we saw horrific scenes of people burning American flags on the streets of the capital.
Laura, I was reminded of some of the scenes occurring in Washington, D.C., where I live. It looked like it was happening in Tehran during Quds Day marches over there. And I would point to you to a leaked document that surfaced a few months ago from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Intelligence Organization's head, ordering the IRGC's intelligence organization to provide resources and all assistance that's necessary to some of these protests in the West. And so the Islamic Republic has long eyed this movement that's happening in the West as fertile ground for infiltration and influence operations. The Director of National Intelligence disclosed that the Islamic Republic has started paying some of these protesters. And so this is a very serious concern, but we need to hear more from the U.S. government as to not only it monitoring these developments, but what is it going to do about it to thwart this kind of interference in our democracy.
Jason, thank you very much. Jason Brodsky there at United Against a Nuclear Iran. Now, the IDF has revealed details about the operation to recover the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages from Gaza. They were found in a tunnel in the central city of Khan Yunis. Here's the IDF spokesman, Daniel Hagari, speaking just a short while ago.
The Hamas terror organization abducted our hostages into their tunnels, 20 meters below the city of Khan Yunis. This was underneath an area that was previously designated as a humanitarian area by the IDF, an area for Gazan civilians to move away from the battlefield and receive humanitarian aid and shelter. Hamas exploited the humanitarian area and used it to hold our hostage captive.
Well, with more on that now, here's our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran.
A final farewell prayer for 5 slain hostages. The IDF and Shin Bet recovered the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages killed by Hamas-led terrorists on October 7th and taken to Gaza. They were identified as Maya Goren, 56, and Ravid Katz, 51, from Kibbutz Nir Oz, IDF Staff Sergeant in the reserves Oren Goldin from Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak, Staff Sergeant Tomer Achimas, and Sergeant Kirill Brodsky. All 5 were previously declared dead by Israel, with their remains located in a tunnel in Khan Yunis on Wednesday.
This was an operation guided by Shin Bet Intelligence and the Intelligence Directorate of the IDF, forces of the Commando Brigade, Egaz Unit, Yahalom Unit, Combat Engineering Troops, and a company from the 7th Brigade raided an underground compound in Khan Yunis.
The hostages were being held below an area that was previously designated as a humanitarian area, in a tunnel roughly 200 meters long and 20 meters deep, with several rooms where the hostages were located.
It's hard to describe in words what an operation of this kind feels like. The sense of responsibility, the importance of the task. Everything boils down to one moment when you realize you've arrived at the right place. I know that hundreds of people are responsible for discovering the location of the bodies. Bringing back the hostages, whether alive or dead, this is our life's mission.
According to the IDF, Shin Bet interrogations of detained terrorists helped the forces zero in on the precise tunnel in Khan Yunis where the bodies were hidden. Prior to the operation, the forces did not know which bodies were involved, and their identities were only discovered through forensic examination. The IDF says recovering the hostages' bodies was one of the main objectives of its current operation in the southern Gaza city.
Today is a horrible feeling. Yesterday, they retrieved the bodies of 5 hostages. These are families that I love very much. We've become close friends over these past 290-something days. The pain is deep for all of us, not just the families.
Meanwhile, an IDF reservist who filmed and circulated a video showing the recovery of the bodies prior to the families being notified was permanently dismissed from reserve duty. He's set to be jailed for 10 days. Following the retrieval of the 5 hostages, there are currently 115 hostages still held in the Gaza Strip, including 41 who have been declared dead. And the families of the hostages are warning that their time is running out.
Well, joining us now, Amir Al-Fassa is the nephew of Maya Goren, and Maya and her husband Avner were both murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Maya's body was kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz and has just been recovered by the IDF. Amir, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Our condolences for your loss and to your family. Tragically, you already knew, didn't you, that Maya was no longer alive. Do you have a sense of relief, at least, that her body is being brought back to Israel for a proper burial?
Thank you very much. Yes, we have some relief, but we have a lot of mixed feelings in this 24 hours that goes. It's with a lot of sadness. And the fact that now our personal journey is kind of got into an end. We really wanted Maya to come back to Israel to bury her next to Avner, and we shouted it in everywhere, every way we can this past more than 9 months. But I personally feel that the big mission is still there to bring everyone else home, and I know that I personally will be there in the streets, in the world, to shout it.
So yeah,
Israel people will come back.
So 115 people, of course, still being held in Gaza. Your aunt, you have 4 cousins. Your aunt had 4 children who are now all orphans. Does this bring a sense of closure for them? Will they be able to continue with their lives, albeit still in grief?
Can you repeat it again? I didn't hear you.
Your cousins, Maya's 4 children, are now, of course, tragically orphans, but now they can bury their parents, as you say, side by side. Will they be able to move on with their lives a bit more now?
Yes, kind of. You know, we have a lot of they have a lot of process to make, so it's hard to say now what will happen. only tomorrow we have a funeral for Maya. And we are, our family, my mother is Avner's sister, and me and my brothers, and my brother and sister, and my father, we will be there for them. I know it won't be easy. So I know that they are strong. There are 4 really strong people: Asif Bar, Gal, and Dekel. And I know it will be tough, but we will be there for them in every way, in everything they will need. Kibbutz Nir Oz, it's a community that is now broken because of all of the lost people the murdered people and the kidnapped people, but it's still a community that also will hug them in this process.
Well, Maya it sounds like she was very much a mother figure in the kibbutz. She had 4 of her own children. She was also a kindergarten teacher. And we've got this now famous photograph of her cradling baby Kfir Bibas, who is himself still a hostage in Gaza. Just how would you like your aunt, Maya, to be remembered?
Maya, like you said, she was a mom, and she cared a lot of the people around her, the family, the babies she took care of, the parents of them. She was really dedicated, and she was a giving person. She was giving for herself a lot to the other people around her. And we will remember her as this person, the one who cared for each other a lot, put the others before herself, and this is what will make us now help the other people that wants their loved one to come back. The ones that they want to bury them. There are now 41 people that was murdered and are still in Gaza, and the other one are 74 people that were alive, and we need them to come back as soon as possible before it will be too late. Lately, we heard about 2 hostages that was murdered in captivity. So the time is running out, and we need to do anything to bring them home, like Maya would do if she was alive.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Amir. May the memories of Maya and Avner be a blessing. We hope your family can move on somewhat from this horrific situation. Amir Al-Fassa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, time for a short break. When we come back, we'll head to the north of Israel, where the attacks from the Lebanese group Hezbollah continue. More on that next.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back. The Palestinian businessman Mohammed Dahlan has reacted to reports that he's being touted as a possible future leader in Gaza. Dahlan, who is a rival of the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, wrote on social media that he would not support any choice that has not been reached based on Palestinian national understandings. He also referred to the war in Gaza as an ongoing genocide. We'll hear to talk more about that our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran. Ariel, it's 17 years since Mohammed Dahlan had to flee Gaza. People are now talking about him as a possible leader to come back and rule the Strip.
Right, so he fled Gaza following the ascension to power of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And like many Fatah officials, he left. The ones who didn't were either brutally killed or worse, if there can be such a thing. But really, with these talks about who will assume responsibility over the Gaza Strip the day after the war, the question, and Israel denying that both Hamas or the PA will be able to assume that role. So the question is, who is this moderate Palestinian who doesn't want the destruction of Israel, who could take this position? Now, this Dahlan's name has been touted, as you mentioned, and following his denial, we reached out to sources close to Dahlan, who currently resides in the UAE, and while they did confirm Dahlan's denial that he has no interest in assuming an official role in the Palestinian Authority, they did say that Dahlan, quote, will be the kingmaker but not the king, meaning that his strongman position in the Fatah remains, and he wants to use that to kind of form the next phase of leadership in the PA.
But not necessarily.
He doesn't want the role. He wants to be responsible for the person who takes that role.
But there are reports that he does want to come back to Gaza. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in the UAE.
Look, he denied that he wants any official position. So according to what this source is saying, let's add a few more quotes. He's in another league with a master view over things, but will not take an official position. So I think he's trying to position himself as the man behind the scenes, again, the kingmaker, but not the person in the forefront who has to deal with all this pressure. The person who the sources close to Dahlan has the most likelihood of assuming that position is a former foreign minister of the PA, Nasser al-Kidwa. He also is in exile. He's not in the PA territories. He's in Cairo, to the best of my understanding. Now, Kidwa, that's an interesting possibility because he is not only part of the core of Fatah, but he's also the nephew of Yasser Arafat, the former
so
the
he
first
has a kind of a
president.
kudos.
And so he is accepted, he would be or could be accepted by all the different Palestinian factions, whereas Dahlan would have heavy opposition in both factions, and any other name would be vetoed by one faction or another. So I think this is interesting because this shows that there is discourse among Palestinian politicians who can assume this role the day after. There's an understanding that Hamas can't be at the top of the leadership, but if there is some form of unity government the day after, that Hamas does have a seat at the table calling the shots, that would be a victory for Hamas, because that way they can enjoy from the leadership position of the Palestinians, but not have to assume any official responsibility, and all their attention and efforts and time can go to continuing to build their war machine against Israel.
It's an extremely complex situation of conflicting loyalties, isn't it? Thank you very much. Ariel Osseran there. Now, sirens have been blaring across Israel's northern communities today amid a multiple drone attack from across the border in Lebanon. Our Zach Anders is there for us now. Zach, what's happening?
Well, it's been a busy day. Hezbollah claiming responsibility for 9 attacks. We don't have any reports of casualties that have come in. We're still waiting. And I think that there has been some damage, but to communities that are right there on the border that are evacuated. So we don't have any comprehensive damage reports as of yet. Amazing video out today on social media of, again, highlighting what we've been talking about for months, the difficulty of the air defense systems being able to intercept these drones. The air defense missile, ground-to-air missile, appears to initially start heading towards one of the 2 drones that you see in the video. Now, this is all unconfirmed. This is on social media. We don't have confirmation that these were, in fact, Hezbollah drones. They, at that distance, look like they could also have been Israeli drones. These were large enough to be either or, so we don't know for certain. But in the video, the interceptor missile appears to start heading towards one of these 2 drones that are flying next to each other, one in front of the other, and then makes a beeline, a U-turn, and heads straight for the ground and explodes. It appears like probably detonated before it hit the ground, but a loud thump, and the person taking the video that's posted on social media dives for cover. It landed near them. Really remarkable stuff, and it highlights again what has been the error, what's been the problem with the drones, the inability to use the current air defense systems capabilities to shoot down these drones. We know within the last week that the IDF is bringing some of their older systems out of storage. If you've ever seen videos online of American ships with their CRAM systems that are the ships that basically shoot thousands of bullets, and you can see it looks like a gold streak across the sky, they're bringing some of those systems out of storage, older systems that are shooting rounds, the ammunition essentially, at these drones, attempting that way to target them and shoot them down. So we know that there's been some changes that have been taking place. We know that Israeli fighter jets have been attempting to shoot these down from the air, air-to-air kills. Really, it's remarkable to see the landscape and how things have changed over the course of this conflict. But one thing is really clear, that the air defense capabilities have been strained and tested by these drones, fatalities coming from these drones. And we don't know for certain either if it's a matter of detection or a matter of current capabilities in being able to shoot these things down, because our sources don't share and won't share where the deficiencies lie and what is the real problem. They don't want to communicate any of that to the other side, obviously. So it's really curious to see what's been developing here. Again, we don't have from today's attacks any reports of casualties, but potential there for some damage from what appears to be multiple drone launches throughout the day. And also some rocket launches as well, but we're still working to confirm some of these details. Really remarkable stuff to watch what's been taking shape, and really remarkable video to be able to see this in action, and underscores the entire problem of this war here in the north.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Andrews there, up in the north of Israel. Well, with me in the studio this hour, Eran Lahav is a senior researcher for global terrorism and Iran proxy groups at IDSF. And this increased use of drones by Iran's proxies is becoming a real headache for Israel, isn't it?
Definitely. I think this is part of the tendency of Iran, its proxies, to exhaust Israel, and also part of the Iranian strategy to let Hezbollah, which is the, let's say, the closest proxy to Iran, I would say, to try gradually and slowly to get it into the war. And we see now it's being like a limited warfare between Israel and Hezbollah, and they're trying also to humiliate Israel in a way. We saw this surveillance drone that's been used, the Hudhud, try to show, okay, we can actually do everything, we can actually see you everywhere. And this is something which is trying to, let's say, drive Israel crazy in that matter. And on the same time, they can use, I mean, Iran, they can, part of the master plan, they can use other proxies at the same time, like the Houthis, for example, or Hamas and the Shiite militias in Iraq.
And we're seeing them coordinate more closely increasingly, aren't we?
Definitely. This is part of the big strategy, which is the unity of the fronts against Israel. This is something that was planned by the Al-Quds Force commander, Qasem Soleimani, the former one, who was eliminated in 2020. This was part of the idea. so they could unify the fronts against Israel and to strangle it in the strangle ring, and from all kind of all directions, also from Hamas, also from Judea and Samaria, with the Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and from
So
Iraq.
what should Israel do then long term? Is it futile to just keep having these skirmishes with the various proxy groups?
I mean, we are in this multi-front war, and this is something which will take some time. And of course, from the long term, I think we need to, as we already do, we need to hit the main, like the octopus, the Iranian octopus. We need to hit the head of the snake in that matter. And also, we need to show some deterrent. So, for example, what Israel did in Yemen, in Hodeidah port, this is also a good message that we also need to change the equation. Also, we need to increase and make it like a much
Be less
harsher...
defensive and more offensive.
Yeah, more offensive, but also to change the equation that if they will shoot again, we'll have a much harsher reaction. For example, like eliminating one of their officials, the Houthis official, for example. And this is going to be a much stronger message.
Okay, all right, Eran Lahaf, thank you very much indeed. Well, Yemen's Houthis say they will continue to attack Israel even after Israeli jets pounded the port of Hodeidah last week, turning it into a giant fireball. It's almost a week since the group sent an explosive-laden drone over 2,000 kilometers where it hit an apartment in Tel Aviv, killing one person. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Catherine Perez-Shakdam. She's the Director of Forward Strategy and an expert on Iran, Yemen and radical movements. Good to see you, Catherine. So that massive strike on Hodeidah apparently wasn't enough to deter the Houthis. They've come out with a statement today saying they will continue.
Yes, I mean, I kind of expecting them to do that. Something that I think hasn't transpired just yet in the media is we talk a lot, and I know that they've taken, I mean, they claimed the attackers to be their own, and that they decided of their own volition to attack Israel, and successfully so, unfortunately. But I think we need to understand that the Houthis, as a militia group, at its core is no more than 5,000 fighters. And that actually, what we witnessed, this attack against Israel, and going as far back as the first attack against Eilat, as well as those attacks that we've seen in the Red Sea, have been carried out by the OSGC. So the OSGC has units in Yemen. We know that to be true. We have data to verify this information. And essentially what you're seeing is an absolute takeover, colonial takeover of the Houthi militia by the OSGC. And the reason being, no one is actually really looking at Yemen. And for many great reasons, the Houthi have been dismissed as this ragtag army type setup. And this is true to some extent, but things have changed dramatically over the past few years, and they have reached capacity. They have managed to acquire weapons that were transferred to them. We know that to be true too, by the OSGC through various channels. And the problem that we're facing today is that we call it the Houthis, but they're actually no more just that. They are an extension of the OSGC, and you could see that they are actually carrying attacks that are in the benefit of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the Islamic Republic of Iran is then able to claim that it was the Houthis, that they really had nothing to do with it other than support the effort. And it makes it very convenient for Iran to prevent retaliation on its ground and to once again hide behind a proxy and make sure that those populations, the Yemenis, are the one bearing the brunt of the attack should there be any civilian fallout. And I think it's quite despicable. And it's time for the international community to wake up to this reality and realize that actually, just like with Hamas and Hezbollah, what we're witnessing in Yemen is a takeover of the RSGC of its proxies military.
Well, Catherine, I mean, the Saudis, of course, were leading a coalition to fight the Houthis until quite recently. What do you make of the fact that they have just welcomed a deal, the Saudis, between the Yemeni government and the Houthis? It's related to banking, but is this a sign that the Gulf states have kind of seen which way the wind is blowing and have decided that the Houthis are just too much trouble for them to take on?
No. There's something quite interesting about the GCC, and in particular how Saudi Arabia handles its affairs. We need to remember that Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, and that means that Mohammed bin Salman and his father, King Salman, have the ability to, I would say, remain insulated from many things, and they have the ability to also absorb heat And so they plan 150 years ahead when we're planning for the next political cycle. And that means that Saudi Arabia is in a position, because of its wealth and its position, its military position, and its ability to acquire tech, to wait it out. And I think what they're trying to do is to create a space by which they are preventing further escalation, at least immediate escalation, waiting to see what the international community is doing. And I think that right now, Mohammed bin Salman, who I think we all know that he's leading the show when it comes to Yemen in particular, is actually waiting for the next administration to come rolling into the White House. And he's waiting out for Trump, but not Trump. We'll see what happens. But he wants to buy himself a few months, because if Trump is indeed ushered into the White House and carry and make good on his promise to retaliate against the Islamic Republic of Iran, or at least to hinder them and their progress, then it means that they don't have to do anything, or that they might join potentially a coalition against the Islamic Republic. So I think it's not to be read as an admission of defeat and an understanding that Israel is losing this war, not at all. I think if anything, Israel is winning this war. The problem is Israel is fighting alone right now, and it is difficult when you are faced with an enemy like the Islamic Republic.
Catherine Perez-Shakdam, thank you very much. Now, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad is meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Moscow today. It's being seen as a step towards a reconciliation between Assad and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Assad has so far ruled out meeting Erdogan, who backs the opposition in Syria, unless he agrees to withdraw his troops. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Omar Abu Layla, Executive Director at Deir Ezor 24. Thank you very much for being with us, Omar. Good to see you again. So, Turkish officials, they had to deny reports that Erdogan would be there in person today. But this is a sign, isn't it, that the two leaders are working towards a rapprochement?
Thank you so much, Laura, for having me. Bashar al-Assad and Erdogan going to meet, maybe not today, the meeting between Bashar al-Assad and Putin today, I do believe it's far away from what's going on, or this discussion between Syria and Turkey. It's about the next stage of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. In my observation or my thoughts, I do believe the Russians call Bashar al-Assad to come to meet him in person from Putin, to tell him that you don't do any stupid movement in the next stage of the conflict. If Israel launched a war against Hezbollah, especially now Netanyahu in the United States, and that's like one of the main things that Putin wanted to discuss it with Bashar al-Assad directly. Also, we heard President Erdogan in the past weeks with his foreign minister and other officials, Turkish officials, they said it publicly that we would like to have or to rebuild the relationship between Syria and Turkey as it's before 2011. So we are not surprised if it happens soon, and we expect this will happen.
Well, Assad has been embraced already, hasn't he, by most of the Arab world. Jordan, one of the countries leading that policy, but Turkey still officially refuses to engage with him. If Turkey does embrace Assad, what will that mean for Syria?
Disaster, to be honest with you. If we talk about one city remain out of Bashar al-Assad control, Idlib, despite it's under the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham control, we talk about millions of civilians who they never agreed to be under Bashar al-Assad control or area. So if Turkey decide to withdraw from Syria, as Bashar al-Assad put one of its conditions or his conditions against Turkey with Turkey, like I would like to meet with Erdogan, but firstly, the Turkish troops should withdraw from the country. Then we talk about Idlib. So the Turkish military points will back to Turkey, and then immediately Russia and Assad will launch a huge military operation against Idlib. And we talk about millions of Syrians, they will be in a huge threat or danger because Bashar al-Assad, its next step will be Idlib. This is one of the things. The other thing is also that, like, if Turkey became one of this coalition with Bashar al-Assad, we talk about Iran, we talk about Bashar al-Assad, Syria, we talk about Russia, and other allies in the region. This is the real danger or threat to Israel as well, because the militia will be more active against other countries, including against Israel.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you that. I mean, would that be a very dangerous situation for Israel if two sworn enemies of Israel, Assad and Erdogan, made an alliance?
Definitely, Laura. The militia, we remember very well in the beginning of 2017 how they engaged in the Syrian army to fight against Daesh. And when they were just like small groups, and now they are a real threat to the entire region, not only against Israel. We mentioned this in many interviews with you in the past weeks. And what just amazing, and a NATO country like Turkey will be part of with Russia, or alliance with Russia and Syria and Iran. Amazing what a threat coming from the other militia in Syria, because Turkey cannot force this militia to stop threatening other countries like parts and in the ground other countries like Israel. They will be huger or bigger than this period, on this period.
Omar Abu Laila, he's at Deir ez-Zor 24. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Now, the Paris Olympic Games will get underway tomorrow. A huge opening ceremony expected in around 24 hours. The Israeli men's football team were the first Israeli athletes to perform at the Games. And although the Israeli national anthem, the Hatikva, was booed at the opening at the Parc des Princes, the match did pass off peacefully and ended in a 1-1 draw. We're here to talk about that. We're joined by Uri Levy, journalist and founder of Babagol. Great to see you, Uri.
Great to see you.
It's been a while. Everyone's very anxious, aren't they, for the Israeli athletes? I mean, we're really holding our breath as we see them descend into this very, very hostile environment. But the match was okay last night.
Yes, the match was okay, but it's important to put the context. You know, it's the first time since 1976 that Israel sends a football team to the Olympics. So it's quite an historical moment. Plus, we have this collective memory of what happened in 1972. So every time Israel is participating in the
Olympics. And remind the viewers who don't know what happened in 72.
In 72, the Munich massacre, of course, of the Israeli athletes. So it's always there in the background. And to add to the atmosphere, yesterday in the opening game of the Olympic football tournament, the match between Argentina and Morocco was interrupted by crowds crushing into the field, letting the match to end properly, continuing only after 2 hours. So there were some, I would say, some thoughts or some fears that something may happen on the Israel match against Mali, but the Paris police handed in 1,000 policemen for this match. Only 25,000 spectators were present at Parc des Princes, was around 48,000 seats. So it was a high-profile, very much secured event that, although there were jeers and chants in the stands from the Mali fans and pro-Palestinian fans, yes, they did a pretty good job. The match was a little bit disappointing with a 1-1.
Mali are very good, aren't
they?
I just wanted to ask you, because the security at this event is off the scale for all the teams, but especially, of course, for the Israeli team. I wanted to ask you, because you were in Qatar covering the World Cup, how do you think the security situation compares?
I think it's very different, and I've just returned from the Euro in Germany, for example, that we've seen also some flaws in the organization and the security. And in many senses, I think what Qatar World Cup showed us, that it's very difficult to have a flawless tournament in terms of lack of organizations and lack of security. And a very specific type of countries can serve this kind of, It
helps if you're an authoritarian dictatorship.
Exactly. It's very hard today in democracies, especially in Western Europe, that everything is currently shifting politically, culturally, demographically, and there are a lot of tensions. Obviously, when Israel is participating, obviously when it's football, probably the most popular sport in the world, so it adds to the atmosphere and makes it an even bigger challenge. I think that Paris police can handle the situation. They proved it yesterday. Israel have another match in Paris against Paraguay, and the last match is in Nantes. That will be interesting to see against Japan, because I think that the police in other cities, not in Paris, which is the center of events of these Olympics, this will be a real challenge, and let's hope that everything goes through in peace.
All right, well, let's talk about Michaela Moshe on the archery team.
Yes.
She came in a modest number 18, didn't she? But out of 60, I believe.
Yes, a modest start in the round of 32 in the archery. But Michaela Moshe is definitely one of the profiles before these Olympics that had high hopes from all the Israeli delegation. It's starting slow, we'll say. But I think that in the other subjects, in the other fields, Israel has big hopes for at least 4 or 5 medals in these Olympics. If we are speaking about the windsurfing, for example, Sharon Cantor is a world champion, can do something interesting. Obviously, Artyom
And that will be on the Seine, will it?
Yes, yes,
Wow,
yes.
that'll be interesting.
And Artyom Dolgopiaty is a gold medalist from Tokyo. If he's healthy, I think he's also a good prospect for a medal. 4 to 5 medals would be a great success for Israel here.
What other sports is Israel hoping to get?
Israel is participating, obviously, in all the track and field professions. You have Blessing Afirfa and Maor Turi and Luna Chamtai Salpeter that is participating in the marathon for women. And I think that in general, Israel sent 88 athletes to these games. It's not the biggest, but it's certainly respectable. They're going to compete in 18 different sports. So
judo?
Yeah.
Any hopes in judo?
Of course, 12 competitors in the judo. We have also we have a big tradition in judo. We remember Oren Smadja, Yael Arad, all won medals in Barcelona. Also Ori Sasson, Arik Ze'evi. Yes, we remember them. So every Olympic, judo is our sport.
All right, we wish them all the best. It's really nerve-wracking watching them, but good luck to the whole team. Uri, thank you. Great to see you as always. Uri Levy there from Babagol. That's it for tonight's show. Do stay with us on I24 News. Khalid Ben David is up next with tonight's rundown. Good night.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I24 News.
I24 News launches its 4th channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Prime Minister Netanyahu finally gets to meet with President Biden at the White House. We'll go live to Washington for the latest. More details emerge about the IDF operation that recovered the bodies of 5 Israelis held by Hamas in Gaza. We'll take a closer look. And a Filipino father whose son fell in combat in Gaza now fights for the right to remain in Israel. We'll hear his story. Welcome to the Rundown on I-24 News. I'm Khaled Ben David. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is about to arrive at the White House for his key meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. We will bring you any comments from there as soon as they become available. Now, today's meeting, which was delayed for 2 days due to Biden's recent bout with COVID, came after Netanyahu spoke for almost an hour last night to a joint session of Congress. While speaking to a supportive audience, Netanyahu's words were well received, though around 70 Democratic members of Congress and 1 Republican chose not to come. Also absent was Vice President Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee for president, who will meet with Netanyahu later today. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini breaks down Netanyahu's speech and the reactions to it.
America and Israel must stand together because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a fiery speech at the U.S. Congress Wednesday evening. A record 4th speech by a foreign leader to a joint Congress, receiving a 1-minute standing ovation before even uttering a word, and then at least another 50 rounds of applause throughout the speech. Netanyahu spoke of the horrors of October 7th and praised the hostages who were safely returned home and the Israeli soldiers fighting against Hamas terrorists. He spoke of unity between America and Israel and the need to forge a security alliance in the Middle East to counter Iran.
Iran is virtually behind all the terrorism, all the turmoil, all the chaos, all the killing.
Netanyahu thanked America for its support and asked to fast-track military aid so Israel can finish its job faster. But despite the applause, Netanyahu's visit was marred by controversy. Outside the capital, thousands took to the streets to protest.
I want to be part of a historic movement to stop the genocide, stop the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, to show solidarity.
Some protests even turning violent, with police using pepper spray. One pro-Palestinian demonstrator spray-painted a message in support of Hamas.
Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Netanyahu dismissed criticism of the war in Gaza, claiming that almost no civilians were killed in the latest operation in Rafah, but didn't mention the overall number of almost 40,000 people killed in Gaza since the war began. Although Netanyahu spoke to a crowd of allies and supporters, it wasn't a full house. Around 70 members of Congress, almost all of them Democrats, decided to boycott the speech. Others, like Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib, held a sign with the words "war criminal." 3 family members of hostages held in Gaza were escorted out while wearing T-shirts written "Seal the deal." The immediate response from Hamas was that, quote, the speech shows Netanyahu does not want to conclude the ceasefire deal.
Well, let's go to Washington, D.C., and our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagon, who's at the White House. And Mike, Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly just arriving there.
That's correct. Prime Minister got his much coveted invitation to the White House, to the Oval Office, finally, after a number of years in the Biden administration, not under the terms that he had hoped for. It's chaos this week in Washington. Much of the oxygen has been sucked out of the air in terms of Netanyahu's visit. Still important and urgent issues to be discussed, among them obviously a potential ceasefire and hostage deal, Iran's menacing activities in the region, and trying to figure out here exactly how much sway Joe Biden still holds and how much sway he wants to hold over the next few months. Netanyahu likes to leave Washington and head back to Jerusalem with a message for the Israeli people that he told the President of the United States who's who and what's what. I'm not really sure he's got the leverage this time around. However, he can leave here still dictating the terms of a potential hostage deal, potential ceasefire, depending on how much or how little the Biden administration wants to continue to push the issue here. A senior Biden admin official told reporters yesterday after Netanyahu's speech to Congress that a framework was in place for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. The devil, though, always in the details, and they're still discussing how to implement that deal in those varied phases, which we've heard about for a couple of months now. That administration official said a deal is closable here, and right soon, according to that administration official, it can be done within the next week or so, though that official did not want to put an exact time frame and time limitation on the negotiations.
Mike, I just want to note, we just got news just in the past couple of hours of the passing of the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk, at age 73. I knew Ambassador Indyk. He's been on the show many times. He was the ambassador for the Clinton administration during the time of Prime Minister Netanyahu's first premiership. The two worked together, but also locked horns as the Clinton administration pressured Benjamin Netanyahu to advance the peace process. And I wonder how much would in that spirit, how much of the atmosphere will be in the White House between cooperation and maybe some tension over the so-called day after in Gaza.
Yeah, that's still the big question mark here. And a number of Democratic House members that I spoke with yesterday said they wanted to hear more about the day after scenario. They understand, although they're not really appreciative of the fact that the negotiations are dragging out. But the main question mark that they wanted at least some clarity of was what happens in a post-Hamas Gaza. Who runs it? Who reconstructs it? How long will the Israeli security presence be there? And there was really very little mention of that in the Prime Minister's speech yesterday. He did allude to a de-radicalized, demilitarized Gaza and a potential Palestinian, heavily vetted Palestinian civil administration taking over, but also said there'd be, at least a short to medium term Israeli security presence in the region. So that question still very much left unanswered. The Biden administration has been asking those questions for many months now, and they've said on more than one occasion it's like trying to pull teeth to get answers on those particular fronts. Joe Biden, to this point, yes, he's a lame duck. He's also unburdened by those electoral concerns that he had, some 4 or 5 days ago. It may allow him additional pressure, or at least additional room for pressure here on the Netanyahu government to try to advance answers on those particular lingering questions.
And, Mike, 2 more important meetings for Prime Minister Netanyahu coming up with Vice President and now presumptive Democratic nominee for President Kamala Harris, who was not in the chamber yesterday on Capitol Hill. And, of course, with former President Donald Trump tomorrow in Florida. And Donald Trump's been saying some interesting things the past couple of days in the media.
Only the past couple of days, Donald Trump's been saying interesting things in the media for a number of years now. But yes, I understand your point. In terms of the meeting with Vice President Harris, listen, Netanyahu and Biden, every chance they get, they say, listen, well, we've known each other for 40 years, and the relationship goes back decades, and it's been through thick and thin. You've heard it all. That's not the case with Kamala Harris. The Netanyahu and Harris have virtually no relationship. So while Harris is, for the most part, mimicked the Biden administration's sympathies, grievances, what have you, during the course of October 7th and in the aftermath of it. Harris has been out in front of Biden a few times on those criticisms, but essentially she's towed the company line in one form or another. I think this will very much be a get-to-know-you meeting in a very, very tense time. This is the first foreign policy initiative for Harris, the first foreign policy meeting as the presumed Democratic nominee here, and we're wading right into the thick of an incredible conflict here, an incredibly complicated conflict. So this will be an interesting get-to-know-you for Netanyahu and Harris here today amongst the more urgent issues they have to discuss. And, of course, Netanyahu and Trump, not on the best terms in the aftermath of Netanyahu's very belated congratulations to Joe Biden on his winning the 2020 election. There were some other issues that Trump brought out after his presidency that he didn't agree with the prime minister on. We spoke, about a week and a half ago, it seems like an eternity ago, with Matt Brooks, the head of the Republican Jewish Coalition. He told us and other reporters, listen, I speak with Trump on a regular basis. I speak with Netanyahu on a regular basis. They both told me that whatever happened in the past between the two, essentially water under the bridge, a fruitful relationship can be had here in a second Trump White House. Not sure it's that easy with either of those two gentlemen, but they'll at least be meeting in Mar-a-Lago tomorrow to try to smooth things over and advance whatever ideas they may have for a potential Trump White House come January.
All right, Mike Wagenheim with the White House, and we'll go back, of course, to the White House if we get comments from both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Joe Biden there in the Oval Office. Thank you for that, Mike. And joining us for more, we have Yaki Dayan. He is the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles. He joins us from Tel Aviv. And Yaki, a big meeting, long awaited, maybe not the circumstances that Benjamin Netanyahu anticipated, but we expect the key subjects to stay the same. They'll talk about this hostage deal. The Biden proposal was really the Israel proposal the day after. And, of course, the larger issues in the Middle East, especially tensions with Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies.
Yes, Caleb. So long been waiting is kind of an understatement. More than 4 years. That's the first meeting actually in the White House between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And if we talk about President Biden, for him, it's all about the hostage deal. He wants to close this deal before he leaves office. For him, this is the legacy that he wants to leave. For him, this is the most important thing. And everything derives out of the hostage deal, whether it's the situation up in the north or with the Houthis. For him, this is the exit strategy, and he will put tremendous pressure on Netanyahu to close this deal. For Netanyahu, there are many other elements, I would say. First, he wants to secure the ability of Israel, even after the hostage deal, to continue fighting the Hamas. And for that, he would have to get the green light from the United States to have, for him, some kind of an exit strategy to continue the war on Hamas. Plus, he would speak about the Houthis and Iran and Hezbollah, obviously. And basically, here there is a huge gap between how the administration see the next steps and how Israel sees the next steps. The administration is playing defense, heavily defense, whether it's vis-a-vis the Houthis or the Hezbollah or the Iranians. He doesn't want to move to a much more offensive part. And the Israelis, and we saw that the response from for the drone, the Houthi drone, we saw that Israel went into the offense. And this is exactly what Netanyahu wants to secure from Biden, that the United States will not stay only on the offense, but would agree in some circumstances to move to the offense, especially on the situation up in the north. I'm not sure that he's going to receive that. That's going to be a tremendous ask from President Biden, and he's completely not there. He's very much focused on securing the winning of his successors. So he needs an industrial quiet, and for him, if it's an industrial quiet, it means quiet in the Middle East.
Right, and of course later that meeting, now of huge importance with Vice President Kamala Harris. I just want to note, Kamala Harris, very different, I would say, type of Democratic when it comes to Israel than, for example, Joe Biden, who says he's a proud Zionist. I'll note the late Ambassador Martin Indyk, whose passing has just been announced, a proud Jew and a proud Zionist. Kamala Harris perhaps closer to this new generation of Democrats, who's going to be a challenge for Prime Minister Netanyahu and for other Israeli officials.
You're very right, Kalev. I mean, her assistant was just asked if she defines herself as a Zionist, and he refused to answer that she defines herself as a Zionist, while Biden is always standing proudly and loudly saying that he's a proud Zionist. So there is a huge difference between Kamala Harris and Biden, no doubt. I mean, for Biden, the love for Israel comes from the heart. It's in his kishkis, as we say. And in the range, the Democratic range, the Democratic Party range between Obama and Biden, I think that Kamala Harris is much more closer to Obama than to Biden in her approach towards Israel, and especially now when she wants to secure the votes of the Generation Z and to secure all the young votes that she wants to have. Is definitely trying to create some kind of a difference between her and President Biden on her views towards Israel. So he is going to have a completely different meeting, but what would be the same is that both of them would pressure Netanyahu to finish the war. And if we move to the meeting with Trump, we just heard today that even he will pressure Netanyahu to finish the war. So there is a gap between Netanyahu and his Congress speech to continue fighting till the Hamas would be eradicated, or at least the military capabilities of the Hamas would be eradicated. And the approach that is actually shared from Trump to Kamala Harris, if they have one thing in common, and this is to finish this war as quick as possible.
All right, and we'll see what the Prime Minister has to say in response to that. Yaki Dayan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kalev.
And with us in the studio, our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran and our correspondent Robert Swift. And Ariel, this meeting is being looked at not just by us in Israel, but throughout the region. Igor also, certainly the neighbors of Israel want to see a hostage deal and a ceasefire and maybe move forward on some of the discussions that have been held about making new alliances in the region, including for Israel and some of, for example, some of its Arab neighbors.
Yeah, so Arab media following closely Netanyahu's visit. I got push notifications from Lebanese, Saudi media that Netanyahu had arrived at the White House. That illustrates how closely they're following this visit. And not just Israel's neighbors, but a lot of actors in the region are looking to see what will come out of this meeting. You talked about this, what Netanyahu referenced in his speech, this regional alliance to counter Iran. So on that note, the Houthi leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, he gave a long speech today referring exactly to that, saying that the Abraham alliance means asking the Arabs to cooperate with the enemy against Palestine, against themselves, and against Muslims, which is ridiculous talk. Now, this in his speech, the Houthi leader also took the opportunity to continue to threaten Israel, saying that a response is inevitable. But what we're hearing from Yemen, really in these past few minutes, are reports of American and British airstrikes at least 5 times on the Hodeidah airport. The Hodeidah port was struck by Israel. This is by the international coalition, according to initial reports. So we do see that while the region is following Netanyahu, as you know, he's regional media pays close attention not only to Israel but specifically to Netanyahu. So we're also seeing developments following statements that he made in the speech and responses. So we're seeing that develop really in these past few minutes here in the region.
And Rob, as we heard from Mike, President Biden wants to see this hostage deal done, but even much more so, the families in Israel and a lot of the Israeli public hoping that they'll come out of that White House meeting maybe more optimistic about a deal than, for example, following Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech last night.
Yeah, I think from Biden's perspective, you know, now that he's looking 6 months away from the end of his presidency, it makes sense that he's looking towards his legacy. For the families of, I would say for some of the families of the hostages, they do seem to be increasingly cynical about what the Israeli Prime Minister can provide to them. And so, yeah, they look to alternative leadership in the form of President Biden and to see if he can maneuver the situation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to move closer to some sort of negotiated end to the fighting.
Well, maybe adding to that pressure is, of course, that story that broke overnight about the bodies of 5 Israelis killed by Hamas terrorists on October 7th that were recovered by troops operating in the southern Gaza Strip. All 5 were killed during the terror rampage in southern Israel more than 9 months ago. Their bodies were then dragged into Gaza by terrorists on that day and were brought back to Israel on Wednesday. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osser explains how in this report.
A final farewell prayer for 5 slain hostages. The IDF and Shin Bet recovered the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages killed by Hamas-led terrorists on October 7th and taken to Gaza. They were identified as Maya Goren, 56, and Ravid Katz, 51, from Kibbutz Nir Oz, IDF Staff Sergeant in the Reserves Oren Goldin from Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak, Staff Sergeant Tomer Achimas, and Sergeant Kirill Brodsky. All 5 were previously declared dead by Israel, with their remains located in a tunnel in Khan Yunis on Wednesday.
This was an operation guided by Shin Bet Intelligence and the Intelligence Directorate of the IDF, forces of the Commando Brigade, Egaz Unit, Yahalom Unit, Combat Engineering Troops, and a company from the 7th Brigade raided an underground compound in Khan Yunis.
The hostages were being held below an area that was previously designated as a humanitarian area, in a tunnel roughly 200 meters long and 20 meters deep, with several rooms where the hostages were located.
It's hard to describe in words what an operation of this kind feels like. The sense of responsibility, the importance of the task. Everything boils down to one moment when you realize you've arrived at the right place. I know that hundreds of people are responsible for discovering the location of the bodies. Bringing back the hostages, whether alive or dead, this is our life's mission.
According to the IDF, Shin Bet interrogations of detained terrorists helped the forces zero in on the precise tunnel in Khan Yunis where the bodies were hidden. Prior to the operation, the forces did not know which bodies were involved, and their identities were only discovered through forensic examination. The IDF says recovering the hostages' bodies was one of the main objectives of its current operation in the southern Gaza city.
Today is a horrible feeling. Yesterday, they retrieved the bodies of 5 hostages. These are families that I love very much. We've become close friends over these past 290-something days. The pain is deep for all of us, not just the families.
Meanwhile, an IDF reservist who filmed and circulated a video showing the recovery.
All right, let's go right to the White House now for that meeting between the Prime Minister Netanyahu and Joe Biden.
Everybody in? Welcome. Well, welcome back, Mr. Prime Minister. We got a lot to talk about. I think we should get to it, but the floor is yours.
Mr. President, we've known each other for 40 years, and you've known every Israeli Prime Minister for 50 years, from Golda Meir. So from a proud Jewish Zionist to a proud Irish-American Zionist, I want to thank you for 50 years of public service and 50 years of support for the State of Israel. And I look forward to discussing with you today and working with you in the months ahead on the great issues before us.
I look forward to it as well. By the way, that first meeting with Prime Minister Golda Meir, and she had an assistant sitting next to me, a guy named Rabin. That's how far back it goes. I was only 12 then. But anyway, thank you all for being here.
Okay, well, I have to say, Ariel, I've seen many of these, pre-meeting, they call it the Oval Office scrim. I've even took part in one. That is one of the shortest, if not the shortest one, that I can ever recall seeing.
I was kind of shocked. The only thing that Biden said was mentioning or responding to what Netanyahu said. It's as if he didn't come with any planned statement in advance, when oftentimes the scrim that you called the White House scrim is usually the time when the two leaders take that opportunity to share their positions and what they hope to achieve. Nothing of that was said. I think that was very surprising. Netanyahu did mention, but Biden, I mean, he's been accused maybe of having senior moments, but this is a clear moment of senioritis, in my opinion, regarding a official Oval Office meeting with a leader, such a close country.
I think
Israel.
I think it's going to be interpreted that way, for sure. And also, Prime Minister, one of the very few times I've seen Prime Minister Netanyahu with not much to say. I mean, you look at his speech last night, which ran close to 50 minutes here, and usually in these meetings, even before they go into the Oval Office for the private discussion, he'll go on a few minutes. And I was struck by the brevity, also of Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments as well.
Yeah, there were much fewer standing ovations now than there were yesterday. But just for example, I remember when the Emir of Qatar visited the White House, and this part of the meeting took like 10-15 minutes with multiple statements on either side.
I mean, it usually does take at least a few minutes, not a few seconds. That was quite striking there.
Indeed, yeah.
All right. Well, we don't know yet if there'll be comments after the meeting. I don't believe that's planned, but if they do, of course, we will go back to it. Just to sum up, Prime Minister Netanyahu is now started his face-to-face discussion with President Joe Biden. There are protests taking place outside the White House as that meeting goes through. That was expected there. There you're seeing the footage of the two leaders. Again, not having that much to say at all in public, in a very, very brief appearance before they take their meeting in private. But do stay with us on I-24 News. We are going out brief break. Robert Swift, Ariel Osran, stay with us. And we'll have lots more coming up on the program. We'll also take a look at the Paris Olympics as new threats arise against the Israeli athletes there ahead of the opening ceremony, which will take place tomorrow evening. So stay with us here on I-24 News on The Rundown. We'll be right back.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to the rundown on I-24 News. And as we just saw, U.S. President Joe Biden has begun his meeting there in the White House with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, one of the subjects they certainly will discuss there will be the conflict in northern Israel between the IDF and Hezbollah. The U.S., of course, has been trying to contain and resolve that fighting since it began. But there was no sign of it today as the cross-border fire and drone launches from Lebanon continued. And the Israeli military said its airstrike in South Lebanon took out a Hezbollah operative at a rocket launching site there. For more, let's go to our correspondent, Zach Anders, who's in northern Israel near the border today. And again, yet another day of that fire there across the border with Israel, of saying that they've made a strike there in southern Lebanon, Zach.
Yeah, that's right, Kalev. We've been paying really close attention to what's been shaking shape in the air because yesterday Hezbollah put a statement out where they essentially claimed that they were scaring off Israeli fighter jets. They were having great success with their air defense systems in southern Lebanon in targeting some of the jets. Now, it doesn't appear that they were actually firing on these jets. But their statement was essentially, we have the capabilities to shoot these jets down and the Israelis should be scared. Today, we got video from southern Lebanon on Lebanese media channels of Israeli fighter jets flying, probably the lowest I've seen them in some of these runs throughout this conflict, maybe just a few hundred feet off the ground. It really did seem like a message was being sent with the two, probably looked like F-16s, just a few hundred feet above the ground in one of these southern Lebanese villages, popping off flares and then making a hard turn towards the Israeli border. So we were paying really close attention to what was taking shape there. Some of the activity, as you mentioned, another Hezbollah operative targeted in an airstrike in southern Lebanon. After that cat and mouse game that was taking shape as we were watching that, the drone alerts started to come through, the hostile aircraft intrusions, and we saw over a dozen communities that had red alerts come across. We then later found out that there's been no casualties, no damage reported, although I do believe that there's been some damage near the communities that have been right there on the border, the ones that are evacuated, but we don't have any damage reports yet, so nothing confirmed. But the important part, no casualties. But what's been really interesting has been a social media video that was posted by someone here in the north of the event. As these alerts were coming through, the video was posted about 10 minutes after the alerts. We see two drones flying south, just using the sun to try and figure out which direction they were traveling. And it does appear that they could have been Israeli drones. We don't have any of this confirmed, but either way, you see in the video two drones flying next to each other, probably about 2,000 feet up in the air, and a ground-based interceptor missile fire towards these drones and then make a 180 and slam back into the ground. It really underscores what we've been dealing with for the last 10 months now, is that the air defense systems have been incredibly challenged by the drones here in the north. The drones have caused scores of fatalities on the IDF side. because of some lack of capability, that we just don't quite know what exactly the deficit is at this point, why these drones have been so hard to either detect or intercept. But it's, again, this video underscoring the entire challenge. Hezbollah's drones have been a serious threat here.
Right, and as you say, a challenge for the IDF to get that under control. Zach Anders there in northern Israel. Thank you for that. Let's go back now to Washington, D.C. and the White House and our UC U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. Mike, are you with us? Mike, I've seen over the years many of these sort of pre-meeting chit-chats between Israeli leaders and presidents, many with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I've even been to a couple at the White House. That was pretty much the shortest and most perfunctory exchange of words that I've heard between an Israeli Prime Minister and a president in all my years. What do you make of it?
What do I make of it? Maybe they had more important matters to discuss. Maybe they really weren't in the mood for too much reminiscing and glad-handing. It could be one of the two things, or it could be both. The more urgent matters to get to here. Time is running down for the hostages. Time is running down on Biden's presidency. Time may be running down on Netanyahu's premiership. Little time to waste, and it seemed to be the tone and the theme of those very, very short remarks. Netanyahu thanking Biden, as he does ad nauseum, for his long-term support of Israel. They've known each other 40 years. I'm an Irish-American Zionist. We've heard it all before a million times, and then they went to go take care of business. I wouldn't read too much into it, because what else can you really say at this point in time? What's said has been said in 1,000 different ways, not only between these two gentlemen, but those within their respective administrations and governments. So better they get down to business with the limited time they have than taking another walk down memory lane, at least, from this particular point of view.
Well, perhaps I should say, Mike, there are those who are going to interpret President Biden's very brief words as, unfortunately, as a state of his current condition. And as you said, Prime Minister Netanyahu did speak warmly of President Biden. His remarks were also quite brief, and those are going to be interpreted perhaps of his own. He certainly seemed a lot less comfortable sitting in that chair than he did at the podium on Capitol Hill yesterday.
Well, that's what we talked about at the top of the hour, Kalev. This is not the usual position Netanyahu is in, where he can come into the Oval Office and, as he's often done, try and sometimes successfully dictate the terms of the conversation, and then come back to Jerusalem, as I mentioned earlier, and tell the media, or at least through his agents, tell the media that he told the American president how it's going to be. It's just not that type of situation here. It's not that type of tone with everything going on, not just in Israel with the hostages and the war ongoing, but with President Biden, as you mentioned, his condition, not just his political condition, but his health, his physical condition and his mental condition, which go hand in hand right now. So it's not the time, I don't think, to play those sort of power games at this point. It really is time to get down to the more urgent matters. But yes, people will read into it what they read into it. They can read into it certainly in good faith, in the way you just spoke. But in the end, it is definitely a more uncomfortable position for Prime Minister Netanyahu than it probably ever has been entering the Oval Office.
All right. Well, as you say, Mike Wagenheim there in Washington. And, well, of course, if there are comments after the meeting, but I wouldn't be too optimistic about that. After seeing what we just saw before the meeting, we'll come back to you. But, of course, we will, LI24 News will continue to follow this and come back to you during the course even of the next broadcast to get a sum up on the meeting. I want to... All right. I do want to move on now. Tomorrow does mark the, I want to say thanks Ariel Oseran and Robert Swift for joining us. Let's move on now. Tomorrow does mark the official opening of the Paris Olympics, but the unprecedented security arrangements in the French capital did pass their first big test yesterday. That was the Israel versus Mali soccer match that ended in a 1-1 tie and did pass without serious incident despite pro-Palestinian protests outside the stadium. But serious security concerns remain. According to reports, Israel has warned France of potential attacks from Iran-backed groups against Israeli athletes, along with an Iranian cyber campaign that has been sending direct threats to members of the Israeli team. Our Robert Swift has more in this report.
There are those who seek to undermine the celebratory nature of this joyous event. Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, wrote to his French counterpart, warning of an alleged Iranian-backed plot to target Israeli Olympians. According to Israeli intelligence assessments, Iranian proxies may target Israeli Olympians or tourists during the Games in France.
After October 7, it is a bit terrifying that something similar like what happened there could happen here. But life doesn't just stop, we go on.
Israel's foreign ministry has not declassified and published any intelligence to back up its claim, as the US has on occasion begun doing to reinforce its positions. Meanwhile, Israel's soccer team kicked off their opening match against Mali, drawing 0-0.
I don't like football at all. I'm just coming here to support Israeli team, just for that.
Like the rest of Israel's delegation, the Olympic soccer team is operating in France under heavy security, provided by French authorities and the Shin Bet. This year's games take place 5 decades after 11 Israeli athletes were killed by Palestinians at the 1972 Munich Olympics. Tensions related to the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza have led to enhanced security and heightened tensions. 6 Palestinian athletes are competing in the Games, with many keen to use the platform as an opportunity to highlight their people's plight.
We're with the people of Gaza. My family is there. I have so many friends there, and it's just, we're here for so much more than just competing. We're here to represent our country and to fight for our country in a very peaceful way.
In Gaza, 300 athletes have died and all sports facilities have been destroyed since October the 7th, Palestinian sports officials say. And the games go on.
Well, good luck to the Israeli athletes and all the athletes. Let's hope those games pass without serious incident. And now let's take a look at a different kind of story that has emerged out of the Gaza war. Applications for Israeli citizenship that are submitted by non-Jewish foreign workers are mostly doomed to fail. This is even more so when the application is being done by what you could call a step family. Enrico Basilio is a Filipino citizen and a former labor migrant who was deported 22 years ago from Israel. Now he's back. He wants to become Israeli in order to stay close to the grave of his son, the late Reserve Sergeant Cedric Goren, who fell fighting in January with 20 other combatants in one of the Gaza war's most terrible disasters. Our Pierre Kloschhandler brings us the story of the father's struggle to honor his son's sacrifice. Let's take a look.
This is the last time that he greeted me, this one that he sent me before he died. Hello, Papa. Happy New Year. I love you.
Cedric Goren was born in the 22 November 2000 and died in the 22 January 24. He is our biological son. Okay. Cedric was born from a relationship that we had without marriage.
Yes.
I want you both to sign about affidavit for
the DNA test.
That's it.
And the DNA test to prove that I am the father. We have to respect the Ministry of Interior.
I want to be with him all the time, but it's the plan of God. I cannot do anything.
They know him as a hero in this country. And for you, and for me too. Yes, they will give us an opportunity to stay, to live in Israel. Why not? Anytime that I want to visit, I can come. Not the same. I'm in the Philippines. I need to spend a lot of money. That's why I prepare now to live in Israel, to stay. Because my son is here. But I will stay with him here in Israel. I have a lot of pain in my heart that he didn't feel. what a father I am.
Reserve Master Sergeant Cedric Goren, 23-year-old, a fighter in the 261st Brigade, fell in the Gaza Strip along with 20 other soldiers in one of the war's worst disasters. Cedric was born in Israel out of wedlock to Imelda Goren and Enrico Basilio, two Filipino citizens who migrated to Israel in the 1990s as laborers. That's where Enrico, who was already married in the Philippines and had founded a family, met Imelda.
The story of the family is so complicated, but I fixed it already between her, between my wife, between our children, my children, and Cedric. As a father, I did a mistake in my life. But for me, it's not really a mistake. There's a love everywhere. Sometimes even you have your own, sometimes you meet somebody that can beat your heart again to fall in love.
When Cedric was about a year and a half old, his father was deported back to the Philippines.
Together with my son, we're walking around. And then I was surprised that there's some immigration police were waiting on me. They say, you are Enrico Basilio, you don't have visa, you have to go back in the Philippines. I told them, it's okay, it's my fault. But I beg you, I have my son, he needs me. So please don't take me back in the Philippines. My son, he grow up not by me. This is all the pictures that I have. It's been a long time. I didn't remove it even a minute in my pocket. When I miss them, even I'm in the Philippines, I look on them.
Imelda raised their son on her own, but during the 22 years Cedric and his dad were separated, they remained in constant touch.
It's been a long time. But when he was at the age of 9 years old, he came together with the mama to visit me in the Philippines, in my house together with my children and my wife. At the second time that they came to visit me as 2015, when he was 14 years old.
The last time you saw your son was in 2015?
Yeah. And after that, all the time, just we talk only in the phone. How are you, anak? How are you, papa? How are my brothers and sisters? I said, it's okay. How about your situation in Israel? Papa, it's not so easy because, you know, there's a lot of balagan in Israel now. I say, you must be careful, anak. Anak, it means son. All the time, I'm asking him, my son, where are you now? I'm in Gaza, Papa. You are inside Gaza? No. They didn't tell the truth. No, Papa, I'm only stay in the border.
Cedric wanted to be Israeli, right?
Yeah. Yes.
He wanted Israel to be his home.
Yes.
Cedric was granted Israeli citizenship after completing his military service voluntarily in the Givati Infantry Brigade.
I told you, you are a citizen of Israel, but you are not really Jewish to fight for that country. You are Filipino. Do you know what to say? Yes, Papa, I know I'm Filipino. In my whole body. But please, Papa, in my heart, it belongs here. This is my country. This is my place. I need to protect it. He's gone, but I'm proud of him, even so hard.
How did you know that he was killed?
I received a message called the Israeli embassy. I call and I say, yes, this is Enrico. Anything I can do? They say, you want to go in Israel to have a visit? I told them, what kind of visit? Tell me the truth, what happened? They say, your son is dead. I don't know. I feel the whole world was dropped on me. And then they say, if you want to go back in Israel to be with your son, to attend the funeral, so we will fix everything.
Israel paid for your ticket?
Yes.
You have a family in Philippines.
Yes.
You have a family here.
Yeah. That's why I'm asking for my citizenship if they can give it to me. I talked already to my real family and they let me to be with her because of the situation. I cannot leave her. And then if I want to come to visit in the Philippines, it's easy for me. I work, and then maybe once in a year, I fly to visit my family. But I'll try to do the best things for my two families. That's the life of every Filipinos working in abroad. We prepare to stay together. We are not young, you know. So this is only about our son.
You're ready to accept that Enrico will be part of your life?
Just only the companionship. If I cry, if I'm lonely, there is someone with me.
Enrico's and Imelda's Via Dolorosa, the stations of their loss, brings them here, where a banner eulogizing their son as a hero of Israel has been hanged by the municipality.
The people, he loves him so much.
We are proud because he died for the country. He died with dignity.
We held the Shiba here inside.
Many people, whom the bereaved couple didn't know, came to offer their condolences, including Interior Minister Moshe Arbel. He promised to grant citizenship to both parents. By virtue of being a permanent resident, Imelda received her citizenship in February. Do you trust they will fulfill the promise to Enrico?
Yeah, I believe and I trust him.
My son is Cedric Goren, and I am Basilio. The big mistake that I didn't write my name as a father on some place of the documents. But when we baptized Cedric in the Catholic Church, I have my name there as a father. He used my family name. That is Cedric's handwritten. How could they say that he didn't use my family name? Put in here that I am the father.
The Minister of Interior agreed to Enrico's request to be naturalized, but on condition that a triple DNA test of Enrico, Imelda, and their deceased son be conducted in order to prove Enrico's paternity.
I told them that if you will make a DNA, if you can find nothing and you will take something from my son on the grave to disturb him, I don't need the citizenship. You have to respect my son. I love my son. I don't need it. I can live in the Philippines.
עובדה כזאת יש בה הרבה מאוד טעם לפגם. האיש חי את חייו מתוך ידיעה שסדריק הוא הבן שלו. הוא גיטל אותו עד בערך גיל 2. אחרי שהוא גורש בחזרה לפיליפינים. הוא שמר איתו על קשר. ואימלדה אומרת, אני יודעת עם מי הייתי. משרד הביטחון הכיר בו כאב שכול, כאביו של סדריק. משרד הביטחון עזר להטיס אותו לכאן, ולטובת הלוויה. הוא רשום על כרית הקבר. סדריק, עד היום שהוא נפל, גדל, חי, בידיעה, שאנריק הוא אבא שלו.
מה יותר חזק פה, החמלה או הבירוקרטיה?
כרגע הבירוקרטיה מונעת מאנריקו לקבל אזרחות ישראלית.
כי אני מבין ששר הפנים הפגין חמלה.
חד משמעית, הוא הפגין חמלה. גם כשפניתי אליו בפעם הראשונה, הוא גם ענה לי ממש מיד. משהו קרה באמצע. שאלת השאלות היא, האם באמת יש מידע גנטי של סדריק, שהוא לא בקריית שאול.
According to the casualty assistance officer who is in touch with the family, Cedric's genetic material has finally been discovered at the military rabbinate's headquarters. A blood sample taken from him when he enlisted. Cedric's DNA might thus be extracted. If so, Enrico might be able to prove his paternity and become an Israeli citizen.
One day, anak, we will see each other in the other life.
7 months after the tragedy, the Ministry of Interior finally granted Enrico a temporary resident status for 1 year. He shall be able to work here. The next day, the Immigration Committee of the Knesset convened for a special discussion on the issue of the father, the son, and Israeli citizenship. There's no legal obligation to demand a DNA test, protested the committee chairman, member of Knesset Oded Forer.
I want to apologize in the behalf of the State of Israel. Cedric was our brother. He's our brother. He fought for the State of Israel. He defended the State of Israel, and he died while he was protecting us. So as our brother, you are our family, and we see you as our family, and I hope that as soon as possible your status will be recognized by the Ministry of Interior.
Slowly, Enrico and Imelda returned to their former lives, the lives they had together when Cedric was born, to stand reunited near their son's grave.
I'm going home, anak. Love you. Miss you.
Pierre Clochendler, I-24 News, Tel Aviv.
Oh, that is quite a story. Let me again, before we go, note the passing of former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk, who has passed away at 73. He served as the ambassador here during the 1990s and early aughts. At 2 stints, I got to know Martin, and he appeared frequently as a guest on the show The Rundown. Martin was a proud Jew, a proud Zionist, a proud American, even though he was born in the UK and raised in Australia. He promoted the peace process most of his adult life, clashed with Israeli governments about that. But like I said, he loved Israel. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you for joining us on The Rundown. And catch us when you can. Thanks for joining.